Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to my 3 takeaways episode from the Roy Mangrum interview that I just posted this past Monday. That one to me was so special. It's funny because he doesn't really do a whole lot of podcasts, and he let me know that going into it. I think he'd maybe done a couple beforehand because he likes just being the guy behind the scenes. He likes being the imaginary hand, I think is what he called it, behind the scenes, kind of making everything happen and making everything work with Barbell Voodoo. And if you didn't listen to the podcast, Barbell Voodoo is a clothing company based out of here in Nashville. They've been going for 7 years, and it's something that I've seen a ton being in the fitness industry. A lot of gyms get their shirts made, their clothing made from them, but also they just have some their go-to, what they're known for are funny t-shirts. And he talked about, at the timing of the episode, he talked about how they created a Bernie Sanders shirt off of the Bernie Sanders meme after the inauguration. And over the summer of quarantine, they made a Tiger King t-shirt that blew up. And so they kind of specialize with those funny t-shirts. So you guys need to make sure that you go follow them on Instagram at Barbell Voodoo. You need to make sure you go to barbellvoodoo.com to see some of their different clothing. And it's pretty special what they've got going. And Roy's an amazing dude. And I challenged him to get on podcasts more because his storytelling ability was amazing. And what they do with Barbell Voodoo, they're so community driven and they're so willing to help other gyms in the area and other people in the Nashville community. And that to me is something that is super special. And I let Roy know that during the interview because I just thought it was really cool. That was the thing that I was most impressed by with him before the interview, because I learned that a little bit before the interview, how community driven he was as a man and how community driven they are as a company. So that was super cool. So make sure you go back and listen to the interview if you have not yet already. If you can't tell already, I absolutely loved it. But for now, let's go ahead and get right into my 3 takeaways. Number 1, be willing to bet on yourself. So he talked about how he needed a t-shirt before going to this fitness competition. And he was at the gym working out. And the owner of the gym said, "Oh, go under the front desk. There's some t-shirts under there." And there was like a small and a medium and maybe a large. And if you watched the interview, you saw Roy is a big dude. And he was like, "What do you want me to do? Put all these t-shirts together to get one double XL?" So he didn't have a t-shirt. And so he wanted to make a t-shirt, and he had a t-shirt design idea, but he didn't make it. He didn't get it printed. But then he had a buddy that he was telling this idea about. And he was like, "Print the t-shirt." He's like, "Well, no, it takes like $250 and I don't really have the cash right now, so I'm not going to do it." And then I think it was either later that day or maybe the next day, that same friend who lived in his neighborhood knocked on the door, handed him $125, and he said, "We're business partners now. Go print the t-shirts." He's like, "Okay." And so that's what sparked them creating the podcast, or creating the business, excuse me. The reason I lead with that story with the takeaway of be willing to bet on yourself is he wasn't necessarily willing to bet on himself. Only his friend was kind of willing to bet on him and that idea. And without that, Barbell Voodoo wouldn't be able to grow what it is today. Barbell Voodoo wouldn't be able to contribute $27,000 or $28,000 to the fitness community after the tornado and during COVID and all of that. If he wasn't willing to bet on himself and that guy wasn't willing to bet on him, they wouldn't have been able to have such the great impact that they're having. And the other thing I kind of want to get onto this is so many people are willing to bet on external things rather than themselves, which honestly just pisses me off. Like, I'm just going to go out there and say it. It pisses me off. The number of billboards that I'm seeing for DraftKings, for these online betting sites, like, it fires me up in the worst way possible, because that to me is saying that people are willing to bet on external things rather than themselves. They want to risk something else making them, quote, successful or making them money rather than betting on themselves making them money. Like, if you invest in yourself, if you put money into you, you control the destiny. You're the person who's going to control whether or not that thing comes to fruition, whether or not you actually hit your goals. Don't invest in a lottery ticket. Don't leave it up to external circumstances on whether these numbers are going to give you this amount of money. Don't bet on another football team or a baseball team and rely on them to make you more money, and rely on them to make you, quote, successful. And I say, quote, successful because money isn't the definition of success. And don't go to Vegas and bet on red and hope that makes you money and makes you successful. Invest in yourself. Bet on yourself, because you control the destiny of that. If you can't tell, it's like 6:18 a.m. when I'm recording this podcast, and I'm freaking fired up because I can't stand it when people are more willing to bet on external things rather than bet on themselves. Takeaway number 2 is be yourself, be authentic. Roy talked about early on in the business, they weren't really finding their groove. He was creating some t-shirts. Some were doing pretty well. Some were doing okay, but he couldn't really find his groove. And what he realized is he wasn't doing the funny t-shirts as much. And the joke during the podcast was hilarious. And he was like, you might not be able to tell by looking at me, but I'm a pretty funny guy. And I started dying laughing because he's this big guy, has this big beard, kind of looks like a pretty serious dude. And he's obviously is super funny. And he was like, when I started to embrace that, when I started to embrace being funny and I started to see ideas and make funny t-shirts, other people thought it was funny too. When I started to be myself, when I started to be authentic, that's when my business started to grow. And I think that's a business lesson. I think that's a personal lesson, that we can't try to be something we're not, because other people are going to sense it. Other people, to me, that's one of the number one things that people can sense about somebody else, whether or not they're authentic or not. And people don't want to be around inauthentic people. And then takeaway number 3 is if you can't fathom it yet, that's okay. This is actually one of my favorite takeaways I've ever done. If you can't fathom it, that's okay. And he talked about how right now they have employees, they have a warehouse, they have delivery systems, like they have a lot going on with their business. But if you would have told him 7 years ago that they were going to have all that, he would have been like, psh, yeah, right. Like he wouldn't have been able to fathom it. He wouldn't have been able to even think that there was a chance of that, a glimmer of hope of that. And that's exactly what they have now. They have employees, they have a warehouse, and they've gotten to this point where they can contribute $27,000, $28,000 to the fitness industry. And so I say that as a big takeaway because I think, like me included, and I'm sure a lot of you guys out there listening, you probably have a goal out there that you're not sure that is attainable. You're not sure if you can fathom yourself even being able to achieve that. But just because you can't fathom it doesn't mean you're not going to achieve it. It's okay if you can't fathom it yet. It's okay if you have a little bit of a vision, but you can't really see it yet. You can't really see it coming to fruition yet, because that doesn't mean it can't happen. It takes time. You just got to take one small step at a time. That's why I like to say 1 hour at a time, 1 day at a time, 1 week at a time. Be successful today, attack it, then be successful tomorrow. Then be successful the next day, because a lot of times we get overwhelmed by the big picture, and that causes us to kind of stifle us. That kind of causes us to not take action. It causes us to lose hope, to lose belief in ourselves. But know that it's okay. Know that everybody essentially who's out there, who's created something huge, probably couldn't fathom what they were able to create. All right, guys, my 3 takeaways once again. Be willing to bet on yourself. I could get fired up again about this, but don't be more willing to bet on something external rather than yourself, because you control the destiny when you invest in yourself. And then takeaway number 2 was be yourself. People don't want to be around inauthentic people, and that's not going to help you grow it. What's going to allow you to flourish in your relationships, flourish in your business, flourish in your spiritual life is if you be yourself, you maximize your personality, and if you do what Roy says and you crank the volume up on who you truly are. And then my 3rd takeaway was if you can't fathom it, that's okay. If you have a big goal out there and you can't quite visualize it, you don't know if it's even possible, that's okay. Most people who have created anything big couldn't fathom that they were going to create what they ended up creating. I hope you guys enjoyed these 3 takeaways. I hope you enjoyed the Roy Mangrum interview. If you didn't listen to it yet, make sure you go back and listen to it. It was awesome. His storytelling ability was absurd. There was a time, I think, when I was going back and watching it, there was a time it was probably like 8 to 10 minutes where I didn't even say anything and he was just telling a story. And I remember just sitting here interviewing him being like, this is awesome. Like, this story is so good. And for some reason, he has just such a great way of telling them. So make sure you go back and listen to it. Make sure you start applying these 3 takeaways every single day if they apply to you, so you can get closer and closer to your best you.